Animating tooltips. Let's learn more about how transitions work by creating and animating tooltips on our links. In this lesson, we'll write a simple script to generate tooltips for our links using a bit of JavaScript and the link's title attribute. We'll then make use of transitions on multiple properties and set up different transitions for mouse over and mouse out. We'll also see how we can use a transition on a property that might not seem like something we can transition, the visibility property. To get started, open the Module 2 sample code file and open folder 01 Anchors in the 02 folder. A completed version of this lesson's code is in the folder 02 Tooltips. Here's what we're going to build. We begin with the same hover effect we created in lesson 1. When we hover the link, we see a tooltip appear containing some helpful information related to the link. Let's get started. We begin with our HTML file. In the file index.html, add a title attribute to the anchor tag. We'll also add a class, Anchor Tooltip, which we can use later to make sure our JavaScript only works to build tooltips from the right links. Next, we'll create our JavaScript file. Start by making a new folder called JavaScripts, and within that, a file called tooltips.js. We want our JavaScript to look for any links with the class Anchor Tooltip, so we'll use the document.querySelectorAll method to get them. Then we set up a loop within which we can generate the tooltips. Inside this loop, we want to get the title attribute, and then set up a span element to contain our text from the title attribute. We then set the class name so that we can style this attribute. And apply the title content to this new element. Lastly, we append this to the anchor so that the span element is inside the link. This will allow us to position it above the link. With this in place, we'll link to our JavaScript file before the closing body tag in our index.html file. With our JavaScript generating our title tooltip elements, we can now style them. We start by creating a new file called tooltips.css and linking it from our index.html. In the head of the index file, add the link to the new style sheet. Next, in tooltips.css, we can style our tooltip. First, we add some initial styles for the tooltips. Let's go through what we have here. We're giving the tooltip a background color, border, font size, width, and padding. We're positioning them absolutely and using a little bit of CSS trickery in the left property to calculate the halfway point, then shift it back half the width of the tooltip. This ensures that the tooltip is centered over the link. Lastly, we set the text to be center aligned and apply a z-index to make sure it sits in front of other content. The second block is a subtle detail. It generates a small arrow and positions it in the middle beneath the tooltip. This makes it look more like a speech bubble. Let's see how it looks. With the tooltip in place, we can next make it show on hover. First, we'll make the tooltip invisible and use a transform to move it up a little. That way, it'll animate downward when it shows. Next, we need some way to make this tooltip visible. Since we know it's going to be inside an anchor with class anchor tooltip, we can put the hover on the anchor itself. We set up a block of styles for the anchor tooltip, hover, title tooltip, and set the opacity to 1 with no transform. We should now have two states. This looks like we're along the right track, but there's a problem. Even though the element has opacity set to 0, it's still technically part of the page. If we hover near the top of the link, the tooltip appears. It could also get in the way if we wanted to select text, or even interfere with other elements. Let's hide it using the visibility property. Back in the title tooltip block, set visibility to hidden. In the hover state, we set visibility to visible. We now have a tooltip invisible both in terms of opacity but also visibility, so it no longer blocks the content sitting behind it. Now that we have the hidden and visible states working, let's add some transitions to pull it all together. In the title tooltip block, we add a transition for the opacity and transform. First, we add a transition for the opacity, making it fade in fast at just 0.2 seconds with the ease out timing function. Then we add a second transition for the transform. This time it'll take a little longer at 0.5 seconds, and we'll use the exponential ease out timing function from earlier. Here it is. It looks good on hover. The tooltip fades in while sliding into place nicely. But the mouse out transition is very sudden. When we move the mouse out of the link, the transition tries to animate the opacity and transform back to their beginning positions. However, there's the small matter of the visibility property. Since we've set that to hidden in the CSS, the tooltip is immediately invisible. Let's fix that. We can have different transitions for when the mouse hovers over an element and for when the mouse leaves. Often we only need to add a transition to the main element and let the browser play the transition backwards to come back from the hover state. As we see here though, this won't work. Let's add two different transitions. One for when the mouse hovers the link and another for when it leaves. Begin by copying the transitions from the title tooltip block and putting them into the hover state. The transition in the hover state is the way we want to get to this state. So these transitions will only apply when the mouse hovers the element. Next, we'll adjust the transitions in the non-hover state. First, we'll add a new transition just for the visibility property. We don't need any duration on this property as it can't be animated in that sense. It'll simply switch from visible to invisible. Instead, we'll add a delay of 0.5 seconds. We could take this opportunity also to adjust the timings so that the animation on the way out is different from when it arrives. For now though, we'll keep it simple and use the same values. We'll be creating different types of transitions to and from states later when we animate a button. Here's how it looks. On hover, the tooltip arrives and the outward transition is also smooth. When it leaves, it's also no longer blocking the content behind it. In this lesson, we've learned how transitions can be set to both the mouse over as well as the mouse out states on hover, and use the visibility property to hide content when it's no longer needed. We used a little JavaScript to generate tooltips from the HTML title attribute, and we combined transitions on multiple properties. Next, we'll create a more advanced effect, using multiple elements being revealed and animated on hover. And we'll learn how to make seemingly complex transitions with very little code.